You are tuned to another episode of Meet the Author. I'm David Charles and I'm with my co-producer Helen King.
Hello.
Welcome to you specifically and to all other listeners today, whether you're travelling, working or simply just relaxing. Meet the Author is where we do just that, talking with an author about their book in progress, their newly published book, or their book in wide circulation already, which may have been, and still is, a bestseller. In this episode, we are meeting a published author of very special poetry. As is usual with guests we meet, their book is not only the point of interest, as we will again discover today. In a moment, I will introduce our special guest, but first, we want to welcome to the podcast our colleague and filmmaker, Rob Uzzell.
Hi, David.
Rob is known to many as a special talent, but joins us today because it is he who connected us with today's guest author. How that came to happen, we will get into. But now, it's our great pleasure to welcome our special guest, poet and world traveller, fellow seeker of truth, Bolon Ik, otherwise known to his mum and close friends as Paul. Paul is the author of Poems of Love and Magic in Riddle and Rhyme. Paul, welcome to this podcast.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here. Thank you, Helen.
Bolon Ik, it's great to have you here. And I wonder if you could start by reading, I think, the first paragraph of the introduction in your book.
Sure, I'd love to. So these poems have been written out of a series of profound awakenings and experiences I had returning from a 3-year journey studying yoga and starting a family in Mexico.
My goodness me. Well, what a loaded paragraph that is. So there's clearly a lot to be uncovered there. And I wonder if, first of all, we could begin with talking about the connection between yourself and Rob. Mexico, I think, is the common denominator.
It is, yes.
Yeah. What would you like to tell us about that?
Very fortuitous, synchronic kind of meeting with Robin in the hometown that my children live in Mexico. A very beautiful valley, very sacred pyramids and waterfalls and a conscious community there. And Robin was another one of the conscious community that sort of flew into the town, and that's how we met through kind of mutual friends, didn't we?
Yeah, there was a few of us that all came together at different moments. It's quite a small place, but energetically speaking, there's always so much going on there. So it's quite funny. You can't really avoid each other. When you're supposed to meet, you meet.
Well, they actually say it's one of the most magnetic places on Earth. The mountains, they say, are made of copper. So there's a very strong kind of charge to the place, let's say that.
Wow,
I'm getting the
that's
impression
incredible.
that this might be the sort of place where travellers from all over the world might gravitate to. Am I right about that?
Absolutely, yeah. And generally speaking, fascinating people, that have lived incredibly different lives from what you might say mainstream society are living, in the 9 to 5 and stuff. People who've got off that beaten track or the rat race or whatever other way you want to describe it, and have sort of lived outside of systems, and meeting others who are now all about trying to create new systems that work for everybody and not just for a small handful of people at the top of a pyramid or hierarchical structure that we have at the moment.
This sounds like something that we need to do a bit of a deep dive on at some point. It sounds fascinating to me.
It does. Absolutely fascinating.
Now, just to put this thing into context, from a time perspective, you two came together in Mexico in this very special place. When exactly?
Well, it would be around the back end of 2017, probably into 2018, I think, by the time Robin was in Mexico. It was significant for me because I was going through the breakup of the family that I'd started in Mexico at that time, when this group of light workers, starseeds, all kind of come together, and Robin was one of this kind of group that really sprung out of the woodwork, as it were, in this town. I'd been there for some years, and all of a sudden there was the English-speaking community that my kind of tribe that was there, as well as the sort of Mexican and international tribe. it was just a beautiful turn of events that I was going through a very difficult stage in my life, and it was at that point I needed support, that there were people around me in that sense, and yeah, we got to share some very special moments together, and then the story sort of unfolded, which we may well get into. It's a long story, to be fair. picking and choosing the.
I can see that. There's a number of threads I think we could look at. Perhaps not all today, but interesting. And tell me, I mean, the book that we've been studying, has that come out of that experience, in that direct experience that you had in Mexico, and potentially the breakup of the family that you created there?
Yeah, I kind of liken it to ingredients into a soup, and Mexico was definitely like a point of brewing a lot of these ingredients together in the yoga and starting the family, and I started my sort of process of awakening. Well, I didn't start it, it happened, it unfolded between 2013 into 2015 that I then went to Mexico. So this was kind of like the launch pad, really. I wanted to go study yoga and meditation. I wanted to unplug from the 9-to-5 matrix, and Mexico kind of just, it sang to me, you know. There was many synchronicities between the books I was reading, the information I was taking on, the type of meditations that I was doing, which were heart-based, and then the yoga school I found was a spiritual heart yoga. So it just fit the bill perfectly. And actually it was through that I met the mother of my children, and there was a lot of magic involved in that coming together. And yeah, all of that kind of magic, all those experiences really sort of made me very aware that there was something else going on in this reality than the 9-to-5 sort of material thing that we're told that's all there is, you know. Yeah.
So much more to life as a result of this experience, clearly, has come to life. And the mother of your children, is she Mexican, or is she from England or somewhere else in the world?
Yeah, she's Mexican. Okay. Yeah, a proper Mexican warrior energy to her. Yeah, already had twins when we connected, so it was interesting, the timeline. She split up with her husband of 7 years about 2 or 3 months before we connected, and yeah, it was like timeline split, you know, just fortuitously, serendipitously for us both to sort of open up to start this family together. So actually, when I arrived in Mexico City, we were already pregnant when I arrived to Mexico City to be with Tara. And I was even having to hide in the bathroom because the dad was coming round to drop off the kids, and he didn't know I was in this flat, and it was all, yeah, it was jumped in at the deep end.
Oh, gracious. Yeah.
Oh, right.
It sounds like a film.
Yeah, hiding from the 6'3" Argentine.
Well, what an interesting experience for you.
Yeah.
But he didn't find out.
He didn't, not for probably a month or so, I think. The dust settled somewhat before, yeah, the cat was let out of the bag.
Right. Well, a very profound experience at all kinds of levels, clearly. But we're here to talk about the book, among other things. So, where would you like to take us with the poems of your book, Bolon Ik?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. There's so many to choose from. I'll give a bit of a context to the book. It's been written, as I said, out of a lot of yoga philosophy. So I've been studying non-dual tantric yoga teachings, and progressively as well the interest in the society, and you know how corrupt things were, and what made sense to me and what rang true. Sort of many different things come to light. For example, the numerology, what's in numbers, the writing, you know, how the word has been written, the law, and progressively as I was writing these poems, more and more was revealing itself, not only sort of in my discovery and exploration into the information, but then my ability to share it and the language I was using to share it with. So maybe a first poem I'd like to read, I think sums it up quite well. It's about words and symbols and signs. These words I'm sharing are simply labels to express myself in rhyme, which help me convey what I wish to say. Like fiction, they're the product of mind. The language I use to speak my truth untethers the unconscious design. For now illuminated, the collective they've dictated through these words and symbols and signs. So what's the meaning of a label when written in a fable? You must read between the lines to uncover the mystery of the word and his story, to unlock the matrix and the illusion of time.
Wow. Well, that's lovely. Thank you for that. Tell us what's going through your mind when you're reading that.
What I found, I feel a sense of magic, like the mind sort of starts to disconnect a little bit. Certain poems particularly they kind of birthed themselves as I was coming into a thread of consciousness or a concept which I was defining in my own mind, I guess. The words just wrote themselves, and it kind of made sense as I was speaking my truth about the words, or this context come to life. So, for example, what's the meaning of a label when written into a fable? You must read between the lines. So actually what's the meaning of a label is a question which you can ponder in terms of every word in essence is a label we give an object or a thing. Every word is not what the thing truly is. It never can be the truth. So a light bulb, we give it a word and a context, but it's infinitely more than that, or a cat, or a human being. That we're more than these words. So to me, it really, the concept of a label really defines the truth of what the word is. It's a label, it's not the truth.
Got it.
Yeah?
That's such an interesting observation. So profound. We tend to, it's very restrictive, isn't it, to call something by a word and believe that it is that word.
Sure, and it limits it. We kind of we box it into this idea of like, we can project that thing to be this thing, but it's wow. The minute that we put the word on it, it loses the
energetic.
Yeah, the allness that it is.
Yes.
Where it's come from, and it's such a limiting belief, and as well, words, they come from mind. They're the product of mind. Like fiction, as the poem says. So every word that's ever been spoken or written has come from a man or a woman that's thought of this thing. It's been constructed. So it's kind of, in essence, removed from the truth of the isness of it all. So this is, again, the underlying context of the poems. There's this ultimate truth, this consciousness of oneness, which underpins the writings, and it's from these perspectives I'm drawing insights and showing perspectives of how it plays out in society, how we can see it as one thing, but actually if we take away the veil, there's something so much deeper.
This is interesting. At different levels. We're talking about words being labels, of course, and the things that we're labelling are far bigger than the words that we use to label. But interesting also, every word has its own energy about it, and it conjures something in the soul, I think. and certainly in the mind as to the message that's being conveyed, particularly when these words are strung together. That I find fascinating. I was interested to hear you talk about every word that has been written and every song that has been sung, and you have a poem there in that book along those lines, I think. Maybe we could take a look at and a listen to that. Perhaps you'd like to read this one.
Sure. The title is I Am the One. I wrote every word that's ever been written, which means I've written every word that one's ever wrote. I sang every song that's ever been sung, which means I've sung every song that one's ever sung. I am every man that's ever been born, and I am every woman that's ever been scorned. I am everything one's ever been, and I am the one who's creating this dream.
Well, how about that?
That's beautiful.
The dreamer awakening.
Yes.
What's come clear to me in reading your poems, everyone is loaded. I mean, you can't just read those and then think, okay, flip the page and let's read the next one. I mean, everyone is, in my view, totally profound, and you've got to sit with it for a little bit, and then you've got to read it again slowly, line by line, to really absorb the essence and the meaning behind what you've written. It's remarkable. I love that one. I love that one. And it kind of underlines the kind of the connectedness and the oneness of everything. The sharing of consciousness comes to mind. It's so much. It's loaded, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and actually the process of writing them originally and then sort of rereading them, sort of finding that flow of the over speaker, you know, so
The observer.
yeah, the observer, you know, like that kind of so what's really inspired me when I've watched a great film, or that narration when it's really presented, you know, in such a way you couldn't imagine it being sort of said any other way, and yeah, and so many of these lines have got, there's a surface value to them, but actually when you reread them and you go back through them, there are so many sort of loaded aspects, like you say, and it really become noticeable as I was rereading them, going back over them again, like, wow, I hope people actually do exactly like you said, like go back over them again and sort of really ponder just even what a label is to them, what's the meaning of a fable, you know.
Yeah.
If I could just jump in that instance, because Paul wrote some of it while he was staying at mine in 2020, and I remember him like reading them and then him writing them again. So it's not only do they have lots of levels when you're reading them, but for Paul creating them, he wrote them out many times, right? With some of them, I don't know how many times, but a lot, because they changed progressively over time. So there was always these other levels coming to him as he wrote it.
Well, I was going to ask you. I mean, I got the impression that there's almost an automatic writing going on here. That these words are just kind of come into your head and poof, there they are on the page. But what you're suggesting, Rob, is that that may well have happened, but you were going back to adjust the lines and the words, the labels, and that kind of thing to get it absolutely right, as far as you were concerned.
Yeah,
is that right?
Sure. Yeah, it was a real labour of love in that sense. Like there was the initial inspiration. Maybe it was the first line that really sort of got the flow going.
Right.
But then I found myself afterwards, sort of in retrospect, reading them back and sort of, or if I got quite the right amount of syllables in that line of words, you know, in that sentence, or actually is it actualised, I want to say, or realised, or which word holds more, you know, was aligned with the intention of the poem itself, of the point I was making. So I'm, you know, I can only share from my own experience of kind of creating art and that stuff, like there can be points when the mind is going, oh, do I want to do this or that, and it's the play between the fluidity of what's come out, and then the after tweaking,
Right.
you know, and it's like, oh, do I want a bit more purple in that corner there, or you know, does it
It's a
need a
good
little bit
analogy.
more cream in it, you know, around the clouds or whatever, like, and it's just a touching up of those. The context of the poems are pretty much there, and then yeah, just sort of tweaks and.
Similarly with food and tasting is what I was
Yes.
getting at, which is a
Yeah.
bit of cream.
Yeah. A little bit more pepper, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A bit more
Constant
seasoning
assessment and,
Yeah,
and,
sure.
and adjustment, yes,
Yeah.
yes. But when you're actually writing the poems, is it like automatic writing, do you think?
Yes and no. There's definitely some that sort of came out. So I could maybe share one with you if I can find it in a shortish amount of time.
Speaking of which, I must I must interject here, because I think this is the first book I've come across where there are no page numbers.
Yes, exactly. Great.
Now
Yes.
that has to be
Yeah.
intentional on your
Yeah.
part. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, progressively as I was, you know, I wasn't initially writing a book. I was just expressing myself on paper, and I realised sort of reading them and enjoying them and then sharing them with a few close friends that there was something really special about this material, and progressively more and more come out. And in fact, the first sort of 24 hours of the initial inspiration, maybe 15, 20 poems were written. So, and I was pulling all these ideas from my experiences and studies, and it was making a lot of sense to me. So it was, it was, some really sort of naturally flew out the pen, even to the point I did not know I was writing a poem. I just wanted to write something down, and then progressively it turned into this thing that made sense. See if I can find it.
Do you know, I can hear your
Oh,
publisher saying to you, you've put no numbers on your pages, we need to do that. And you jump in and saying, actually, no, we're not going to have numbers on the pages. This is as it is. And I think that's a lovely idea. I really love it.
and actually it reminds me, because it was going through this process, I didn't realise what I was writing, and then progressively I realised that there's a lot more magic that was sort of underpinning this material, and I realised I was writing a book of magic, really, like, and the concept of having page numbers, and if you see, there's no writing on the spine, so it's
Yes.
kind of like this anonymous book
Yes.
on the bookshelf that
Yes.
you know someone could easily overlook,
Yes.
but if they inquire, they might find some treasure inside, you know.
And I think there is. Well, I know there is.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to get to this next poem in just a moment. But before you do, I just want to make this point. And do correct me if I'm wrong, but you're talking to a person who, for some reason or other, God will know, that struggled with English when he was at school. I don't know where you are on that scale of English language, but correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe you studied poetry in your life. And I don't believe from our conversation before that you'd written much in the way of poetry, if any poetry, prior to writing this book.
Yeah.
Although maybe the book wasn't the first thing in your mind when you started writing poetry. Am I right?
Yeah. Just about spot on, yeah.
Well, how about that? So, I think one point that we'd like to underline here is that we're talking about poetry, which sounds like a sophisticated form of art to many people, including myself. But you don't have to be an accomplished writer of poetry in order to write poetry.
Yeah, sure.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't need a degree in English, do you?
Absolutely not.
It's allowing yourself to get out of the boxes, going back to an earlier part of this, and how words can create labels, which are putting people in smaller and smaller boxes these days with different movements and agendas. So instead of thinking, well, I'm not a poet, or I'm not a scientist, or I'm not, we're all everything. So it's allowing yourself the freedom and the time, which a lot of people need to work out for themselves, how they're going to free their time to become what they actually have within them to be, which is everything or anything they want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to create that
Yes.
space in time for ourselves, don't we? And with the lives that we've all been living over heaven knows how long now, we haven't been giving ourselves enough time, have we?
Mm.
And with yoga and meditation, that certainly worked for you, I think.
It did, yeah. I put myself in these very secluded places where I really wanted to dive deeper into myself, into the teachings, to get to the root of my kind of insecurities, you know, and I knew there's something wasn't right. I knew that ultimately I wasn't sort of very happy, and there was this kind of drive to sort of understand myself and liberate myself from the dungeons of the shadows, and you know, the poetry was a really cathartic way of like processing everything that was happening to me, you know. So going to Mexico and then starting the family and having the fallout and everything that happened, it all kind of happened, and I didn't really get an opportunity to process it from 2013 to sort of getting kicked out of Mexico in 2018.
You were in it.
Just like, yeah. I had my moments in the meditation retreats and stuff where obviously it was reflective, but it was, I defined the Mexico experience as a tumble dryer. I went through the tumble dryer. You could say the washing machine, but it's, you know,
maybe it was
Mexico is a bit more of a tumble dryer. A bit hotter, a bit stickier, yeah.
Gracious.
I really was spun around, and then when I sort of came off the wheel for a while, then all of a sudden all this
came out.
Expression wanted to come out, yeah.
Well, with that thought in mind, shall we go to the next poem?
Let's do it.
Okay, and let us know when you're ready.
Okay.
So I'm going to share a poem here. We were talking about how sometimes the words just wrote themselves, you know. So after an evening, I was sitting with a dear friend of mine, very special abuela, grandmother who lives in London. I was staying with her for some time, and we were having a good discussion, you know, and I went upstairs with this inspiration, and this is what the inspiration was. It's called The Watcher. I am picking and untangling the distortions of reality through the reflections of the world around me. The beings in front of me and the thoughts inside me show me the truth in all its glory. And I share this really as one of those poems that I wrote that first line, I'm picking and untangling the distortions of reality. And then it all just started to sort of, oh yeah, and it wrote itself. I didn't realise I was writing a poem, and it made a lot of sense, and yeah, that's right. Full stop.
Boom, boom. Job done. Well, yeah. Another gem, really, and another one to engender some interesting thoughts in our minds as to what the message is there for each of us.
Thank you.
Rob, you've got a particular favourite, I know.
Yeah, well, I think better for Paul to read it, but What If, I think, is the name of it. And yeah, well, as I said before, Paul was writing a lot of this when he stayed with me a couple of years ago. And he's currently staying with me again, so I should probably read it again. But at the time, that's the one that we remember that I was drawn towards.
Right. Okay.
And actually, one interesting thing to note with coming to stay with Robin a couple of years ago during the lockdown, I did not know that Robin's father was an authored poet. And so I was at the time writing this book,
right?
And yeah, the months I was spent with Robin and his mum gave me that sort of space in time to, you know, go through the poems, more sort of come out, and I really, I read Robin's father's poetry book as well, and I just felt some magic, you know. I just felt like there was like some reason why I was there to work on this project, you know.
Right, how interesting. Well, it's just a special ingredient.
Oh yes.
Well, including the space itself, you know, because my mum's garden is just a sanctuary.
Haven.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful. And we had 2020, although with everything else going on in the world, we're out of that, you know, in the sticks, so to speak, in the countryside. And it's also one of the best years I can remember for having an English summer, sunshine wise, and being able to be outdoors in nature. People remember that was the first lockdown, and it was quite stunning, the weather for the whole summer.
Yes, it was.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was a lovely summer, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So this next poem is called What If? What if love is all you need? Would you love to be free? What if love is all there is? Would you love it all and forgive? What if love is this cure to heal? Would you love this to be real? What if love is who you are? Would you love your deepest scars? What if love is the reason we exist? Would you love the pain you resist? What if love is the way to be? Would you love what I say and agree? What if love is an eternal force? Would you love and accept this as source? What if love is this poem you read? Would you love this flowering seed? And what if this love in me is in you? Would you love this to be true?
Wow.
That's incredibly beautiful.
Well, I can see why it's a favourite of yours, Rob. Yeah, it's amazing, really. I mean, there are some iconic people that we collectively know that speak about spiritual things and the subject of love in this kind of context. And your poetry has to be more widely spread. I mean, it's just wonderful. It's very profound. It's very moving. Yeah, we're gonna have to learn more about this.
Yes, I think it's incredibly educational in a broader sense as well. For all of us, regardless of age, I think it would be fantastic if children were reading your poetry, because it will teach them what they need to know about themselves and who they really are and their emotions.
It's all about that introspection, isn't it? You know, that's what it invites a lot of, is introspection, and that's what this society has been so lacking in, is the ability to go it within. You know, it's always looking for something out there to fill a void that we're. It's not a void. There is something in there. We just got to pay attention to what it is.
Yes.
And then it draws out. You know, as in the root of the word education is educar, which means to draw out from within, not to stuff in. You know, from out there somewhere.
Exactly.
How very true that is.
How very true. Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. It's ironic as well, because I having two children, really one of the driving motivating thing with putting this together into a book was to have it on the page so that my children could pick it up and, you know, get to just have a flavour or sense of who I am. And the book was written nearly entirely in separation with them, so I was in England for most of the time, so writing to them from afar, and I've really got a sense that, as we were talking earlier about, like, just not being particularly great at English, but still finding a sort of a voice to sort of share poetry. I wanted to make it very simple and soft and sweet, and I really got a sense that of the inner child was kind of speaking through me, sort of to me, to my own inner child, and also to my children, and then to every other inner child of anyone who picks up the book. And in fact, just about the only proofreading or feedback that I got from anyone was from a 10-year-old that I was living with at the beginning of the lockdown. She probably read, 20 or 30 pages of poems, and I asked her to give me her feedback on what resonated for her as a child. So it was interesting. Yeah, we were sort of talking about this, you know, maybe desire to get it out to the children, because it was certainly written with a context for them to be able to relate to on some level, and enough pictures for them to pick up on, whilst also having a deeper undertone. You know, something for children and adults. So in the foreword, it's written for all generations. It's
Well, can't disagree. You're absolutely right. It is for all generations, and it'd be particularly interesting to see how children might use this, gravitate to it, and use it, and be affected by it. If anyone of our listeners could come forward with thoughts and ideas as to how that idea could be promoted and pushed forward, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Any inspiration, co-creation? In fact, maybe I could end with sharing this last poem in the book, which kind of invites the reader to co-create with me on that sense.
Aha. Okay, well, we could end with that then. But I think, Helen, you've got a particular favourite that you'd like to hear Bolon Ik read for us.
The camera of life. Who looks through the lens of the camera of life? This life you are living is photography. How you see is a projection to be this life, however it is you see it to be. Who looks through the lens of the camera of life? This life you are living is photography. What do you feel projects on the real, this life whatever way you feel it to be. Who looks through the lens of the camera of life? This life you are living is photography. What you project directly affects your life and how it is you perceive it to be. Who looks through the lens of the camera of life? This life you are living is photography. Whatever you love is seen from above as life and how lovely you'd love it to be. As I look through the lens of the camera of life, this life I realise is photography. As I edit the old memories to project a new story, I change my life and my autobiography.
Wow,
That's fantastic.
I'm not sure I remember that one, but that as a filmmaker really resonates. It's beautiful.
Yes, it's about not being trapped in the story. I think is our life, and being free to write a new one anytime we like. And importantly, about what we see is a result of what we feel believe it to be inside.
Yeah, and all these the ironies and the like everything's in everything else. So like the camera really is, it's such a symbolism of how we perceive something to be, because we're looking at a scene in a certain way.
Yes,
and
indeed.
Yeah,
Paradigm. It's our paradigm.
Absolutely, and one of the things that inspired me about this poem was I was reading some Carlos Castaneda books, and he was studying with Don Juan, a Mexican sorcerer, and he was describing how when an artist creates their creation, the intention in which they're creating in is projected into it, and it projects out of it. So there's it's kind of like it radiates this intention, and one of the things that sort of come to light was when you're taking a photo or making a film, who's looking through the lens and how you're looking through that lens, whether it be the camera lens or our own eyes, how we're looking at it and how we perceive it to be, it shines back out of it. So there's a lot more that can be picked up in a photo than just the imagery, the people's feelings and emotions, the projection of the director, of the photographer, literally projects their feeling, their essence, what they're seeing into the photo. So there's a lot of ironies between how we perceive the world to be, and the lens of the photograph of the camera.
Well, gosh, how true that is, and that would resonate with any filmmaker or director, one way or another. Absolutely love it. That is packed with stuff, isn't it? That particular poem. Well done, well done.
It's kind of interesting. My tagline for my Dragonfly Pictures production company is viewing life through a multifaceted lens. So, as you were saying, the imagery is not the only. It's all the stories are able to be written through any viewpoint.
Yeah.
And again, fascinating with the society that we're currently in, because there's so much distortion in what we're told
And
by
shown.
media and shown to confuse and to distort our sense of what is real. That actually, again, all of this is sort of leading continuously back to having to go within, so that you're guided by your own sense, not something else that's all like tentacles, if you can imagine, sort of trying to grab your attention and say this is it or this is it.
Yeah.
But guided by your centre, your calm, your sense, your own heart, the conviction of your heart, what is right, what is just, what is true.
That is very true. A lesson for us all in that. But one thing that's not become clear at all in our discussion so far is the words actually on the page. Bolon Ik. Now, there's something peculiar about your writing which our listeners today will have no impression of whatsoever. So I wonder if you'd like to explain to us what's going on with the written word in your poems.
Yeah, so during the process of writing the poems, I uncovered, and this is going to be some interesting plays on the words as we're talking, that the way that our sentence structure and the word structures have been put together has created a inversion of the meaning of the words. So passe is this particular aspect of wording that I'm highlighting within the book, and the passe is parts of speech. I think it's French, passe, parts of speech. And so what they've done, the best analogy I can give to give people context is there's prefixes that have been added, prefixes and suffixes which have been added to the root word, which throws it out of a now space scenario and also of a negation. So if I said to you, for example, if something was valid, or if you were competent, if I called you competent, you'd probably be sort of, oh, thank you very much, you'd take it as a compliment. But if I said you were incompetent, you might be offended because the connotation is that you're not competent. So the in as a prefix is a negation of. So when you apply that, for example, to the word insurance, what is a insurance document when the prefix is a no-surance document? So this kind of led me down a very long, deep rabbit hole into how much manipulation there's been of these of the English language. And so as I sort of studied with these English teachers, I started to learn about styles. And for example, anything in a bracket is not considered on the page. So if you ever have any sort of official documents coming through the post, for example, anything that's within a bracket is not actually on the page. It's, or even in quotation marks, it's not on the page. So with these concepts, I decided to rewrite the poems, highlighting all the prefixes, putting them in brackets so that they can be read, but at the same time, they're not on my page, or not on the page of poetry. So the words have not been negated anymore. They've been written sort of to highlight the truth of this manipulation of the word, but also to empower or power my words, because empower would be a no power. So to just shed a bit more light, the rule of the prefixes is that a one syllable vowel at the beginning of a word, for example, idea or awake, a light, this a light, any of those one syllable vowels at the beginning of the word is a negation of the word. So awake, if you're awake, actually that a, like asexual, would be not sexual. So the a at the beginning of the word is a negation, and as well a vowel followed by two consonants. So office or attention. What they've done is they've doubled up the consonant with a vowel at the beginning, and you have this sort of silent, attention. We don't need that second T in there really, but what they're doing is this, the AT at the beginning of tension, attention, it's a negation, it's part of the spelling, which when we know a wizard or a witch, they're known for their spelling, they're casting spells, and what they're doing, they're using their words to do it.
So are you suggesting that this was something that was done deliberately by somebody to effectively, if you spin a spell of a particular nature, a particular type, on all readers following that change?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
What do you have a view on the purpose of doing that?
There's a funny, I get an overview sense that everything's happening for a reason in consciousness, even in the sense of the inversions, we're seeing things back to front. They say that we see in our eyes the opposite way, and through the lens it flips it round so we see the world the way we see it. So there is this sort of parody, this kind of paradox in our experience all the time, and in some senses the word also has that infused in it. So it has the truth, but it also has the inversion in there. Now, if we recognise English to be the last language to have been created, so it's the most modern language that we know in society today, it's a language of wizards and magicians. It's really been constructed, and the more that I found myself diving into the wordplay and the double speak and the triple meanings of words, this polysemy, I think it's called, polysemy, which words which have multiple meanings, spelt the same but can have multiple meanings. Right. There's a trick going on with our language for sure, and it was actually learning through this gentleman's David Wynne Miller. He discovered this modification in the English language. His statement is that it's 90% of the English language is being written to mean nothing and say nothing on purpose. And in essence, it's to have us confused. The conscious mind and the subconscious mind are in this kind of cognitive dissonance, because the subconscious knows the truth of it.
Yes. But
the conscious mind
is negated.
It can be led into a lie. It can believe the lie, and when it believes the lie and is against, it's kind of working against the truth of the subconscious. There's this confusion that kind of happens, and we're in this state of uncertainty. We don't really know.
That state of uncertainty would be enough to stop the unconscious from functioning well. Does this trickery in language apply to any other languages?
It's all across the board, yeah. There's negation in all of them. In fact, having spoken to people progressively about this wordplay and the manipulation, that, for example, people were telling me in Chinese they have ways of saying things which is of a negation to something. The first time I heard it, before I dived into a lot of the language, was in the yoga school, and my teacher Sahagyananda was explaining about what Advaita Vedanta, what it means, and the literal translation of Advaita is not to. So in the terms of the non-dual teachings, the consciousness of oneness, if we could say it in easier context, non-duality, not two. So instead of saying will one, it's Advaita. Vaita is two, but the AD, which is another prefix, has been added to Vaita. So even back 5,000 years, you can see that they were adding the negation of onto these words.
Gracious.
Yeah.
This
Brings
is incredible.
It brings to mind the phrase, again, using words, but the pen is mightier than the sword. Because if you can uncover the manipulations and the distortions, then when your subconscious and your conscious mind are in harmony with each other, then you're no longer, in this dissonance, cognitive dissonance, meaning your letter is your word, is your conviction of your heart, is the truth, is on the page. And you know how a contract operates, and if it's not written, it means nothing. So for us to unpack what issues there are with the corruption in the world, in society, all over the globe at the moment, we need to get to the bottom of this manipulation of the words and how we're continuously negating ourselves when we're in communication, and even whether or not we need to communicate in many circumstances with these addressless and lifeless beings or entities that send windowless envelopes. If there's no postage stamp. It's a huge subject. I can't go into it all now because we'll be here till next week, but it literally is a very, very vital area of how we begin to power ourselves again and reclaim our power from that which has grown up around us in society and taken it away, manipulated it and to their own ends, to their own benefit, and to keep us confused, as Paul said.
Yes, it's like a garden of weeds, isn't it? We need to reclaim ourselves as healthy plants in amongst the weeds that have grown up amongst us.
True. And we thought we were going to be talking about poetry this afternoon. This goes far deeper, and I hadn't quite realised the impact of what you're suggesting and how far back it may go in time. Given the time, I think what we could do now is perhaps move to one of your favourites, and one I think that you were keen to end our episode on with today.
Yeah. And this one is a poem that sits at the very end of the book. It's kind of like one of those hidden songs at the end of a CD that you get in the 90s. It's not officially on the content, so it's a little gem. And it's really it's written to the reader. It's written to what the title is called, Inspiration, Co-Creation. What do these poems inspire in you? I'd love you to express whatever your heart suggests, in any way to impress the truth that I'm sharing with you. Paint what you see or build my epiphany. However it is, do what you do as an inspiration from me to you.
Wow. Well, there's an invitation, isn't it?
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
What a wonderful way to complete your book, your writings, with an invitation to come back and suggest whatever. That's absolutely delightful.
Yeah, it was a nice, literally that, an invitation just for people that, because being an artist myself, there's points when I sort of doubt my ability to maybe sort of, build this magnum opus of a dream that I've got, but I got the sense of offering this up for others as well to help build this dream for me, that maybe someone that sees an image within the poetry and draws that image, maybe there's a second or third edition where people collaboratively bring their creations together and harmonise it with the poetry to create something bigger than the sum of its parts, you know, like people coming together to create something even more expansive, more visual, more
and continuous,
expressive.
Continuously creating.
Well, this is not an ordinary book of poetry, is it? Really,
It's not.
I mean,
No, it's not.
it goes way beyond the norm, really, and it's something that I'm sure all of us here, no doubt all of us here, and listeners would see the power of this, and it's important that people get to read it, get to have it in their hands, and particularly children, I think. I thought also that this is the type of book that we all of us should have at the bedside table. It's the sort of thing that you can read and ponder on whilst you close your eyes and drift quietly, peacefully into sleep. It's that sort of thing, isn't it? And the fact that there are no page numbers means that you haven't got to worry about where it is in the book, and it doesn't matter. You can flick it open and read what comes to view at that point in that moment in time. So it's very, very special. We're privileged to have you here with us, Bolon Ik. Thank you very much for sharing with us your wonderful poetry. What we must complete with is how people can get their copy of your work.
Yep. The best place to go to is to Theallthatis.one, and that's my website.
Is that one the number or one the?
That's one written, so it's ONE. And on the front page there's a link straight to the Amazon page.
Right. So they can route to your website.
Yep.
Theallthatis.one.
Yep.
.one, and hook up through the normal channel with Amazon and they get their hands on a copy.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk about this this beautiful book with beautiful people. So thank you for recognising
Well,
it.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's been our sincere pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.